All right. Welcome back to another episode of Words of the Wise. Today I have Chief Knittel from Plymouth Township PD in Michigan. He has 38 years experience in law enforcement. Welcome to the show, Chief Knittel. Thank you so much for being here.
Paige, thanks for reaching out to me. I look forward to our conversation.
I'm looking forward to it as well. You had some really interesting concepts, and I know wellness is something that's really important to you. So I'm excited to share that with our listeners. But I was hoping that you could first give us a little bit of background. I know you started in this career when you were 19 years old, which is super young. And now, 38 years later, you're the chief of police. So, how did you get started in this profession, and what have the last 38 years looked like for you?
Yeah, well, it started really for me as a young boy. I grew up in a police house. So my father's a Detroit police officer. His brother, my Uncle Eddie, was also a Detroit police officer. They both served 25 and 26 years, retired from the police department. So I grew up in a police house. My dad worked shift work. He brought a lot of things home. He kept a lot from us, but we also knew some of the stresses of the job. My dad growing up was always my hero, so I always wanted to be like my dad, and so I followed in his footsteps in law enforcement. My sister Maureen, who works for the University of Michigan Department of Public Safety and Security, she followed in his footsteps. She's got 33 years of police experience, and then her son, my nephew Patrick Burke, went to my first agency, the Farmington Hills Police Department, and he's been there 2 years. So he's a 2-year officer. So we have about 125 years of law enforcement experience in this region and this area. And my grandfather was a police officer for the Cadillac Corporation in the city of Detroit as well. So it's a kind of a long line of law enforcement, but beginning my career, it started with, I remember my very first interview that I had at Farmington Hills Police Department for a cadet's job. I had to borrow a pair of my dad's socks because I needed dress socks to wear, and I remember wearing those. And I always thought that it gave me good luck when I got selected for the position. So, but yeah, it's so it started very young for me as a young boy, and it's what I always wanted to do. And I feel to this day that God put me on this earth to, of course, first and foremost, to be a father and a husband and a good son, but also in my profession of being a police officer. So, and I'm honored to be a police officer this amount of years.
I love that. Do you think, because the interesting thing that I find is, when I talk to people who come from backgrounds, law enforcement backgrounds, or even have kids that are like, yes, I want to be just like you and I want to follow in your footsteps. There's always kind of this like, I don't know if you want to enter into this profession too. And I hear kind of that resistance. Was your dad supportive of that? Was he like, yes, follow in my footsteps? Or was there kind of like words of wisdom that he shared with you of like, hey, this is what to do and this is what not to do if you are going to follow in my footsteps?
Yeah, so my father and I had conversations. I wouldn't say he encouraged me to go in law enforcement. I think he had a very strong feeling that was the direction I was headed. But in our discussions, when I told him, when I graduated from high school, I told him that played a lot of sports and did a lot of things. And I said, all right, well, I'm ready for my career and I want to go into law enforcement. He said, okay, well, I'll help you. We looked at various agencies in the area. He had some friends at the Farmington Hills Police Department, and he felt that that department would be a good fit for me. So he recommended, and they also said, hey, prior to going to the police academy, prior to being a police officer, why don't you start as a police cadet? And that will give you an opportunity to see what the job's all about, because the cadets at the time worked 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They worked the front desk, took police reports, processed prisoners. He said that will give you a really good opportunity of what the job is all about. Not all of it, but a large portion of it, and to be around police officers and make that decision if that's the career path you want to make. So that's what I did. There were 300 people in the room when I applied for a police cadet position. We're having a lot of challenges today in recruiting. We don't get that number today, unfortunately, but and I was blessed to be selected. And I knew my first week I worked the midnight shift, and I just thought it was the greatest thing in the world. And I was just so happy that somebody was going to pay me to do that job. So, like I say, I was very blessed to get on a great organization. And my dad, and I've already said it once, but, he was my hero growing up. He still is my hero. He's 88 years old and comes over and walks my dog almost every day. And, one of my, he is my best friend. And but he gave me some great advice. Yeah.
Yeah. And you also said that, growing up in that household, you saw some of like maybe how that impacts you as a kid in law enforcement. You said that one of your greatest jobs is obviously law enforcement, but also being a dad and being a husband. And you said earlier that, your dad maybe brought some things home or you saw the realities of shift work. Do you think that that also, like having that perspective, helped you to be a better dad and to like maybe not bring things home or try to disconnect from things? Like, how did that impact you now that you are a father and a husband in law enforcement?
Yeah. My dad was very careful about, when he came home, what was said, what wasn't said. Of course, as a child, you overhear things sometimes maybe that you shouldn't have. I know that he had a lot of stresses in his life due to that. My dad worked a couple jobs. He worked security on the side on top of being a police officer to make sure that myself, my two sisters, my mom, had everything that we needed. And, my dad worked, again, a lot of different shifts, but he always made his family a priority. He always made sure that he was at all of our football games and baseball games and, softball games for my sister. And, I look at that and I grow, raising my children, I can count on one hand, even with shift work and all the responsibilities that I have, I can count on one hand the games I missed and I regret each one of them. But my kids understand, and I understood it, that if my dad was working that, he couldn't be there. But between him and my mom, they always made sure they were at the games. Now, as grandparents, they're at every one of my children's games. They're not children anymore. They're in their 20s. But when they were children, they made sure they're all those games. So my dad made family his priority, but he was also, when he went to work, he was 100% dedicated to his work. And then the other piece I think is important is I was around a lot of my dad's friends, and a lot of them were police officers. And seeing them, my dad's good friend Maurice Cochran and Herbie Colts and these guys, I watched them and I was like, gosh, I want to be just like those guys. I mean, those guys are like, they were just special. They treated people like just outstanding human beings. And I learned so much from that, even before I ever was hired as a police cadet or went to the police academy. I learned because I watched how they treated people, how they treated each other. Then my dad also had a lot of friends outside of law enforcement too. So I saw how that interaction was too. So, but yeah, I was blessed and I just learned a lot before I ever left my house.
Well, your dad sounds like he's a great guy and taught you a lot of really great things. And, I want to touch on a few of these things because I think we forget that people are looking at how to be. They're looking at you, especially if you're further along in your career, or maybe you found a certain level of success that other people strive to have. People are looking at you for how to behave and, how you're treating people and how you're presenting yourself. And so I think it's an important reminder because those individuals that you just talked about, maybe they didn't think that. They weren't like, yeah, this young kid's looking at me and he's aspiring to be like me. I think that especially, I think if you're really humble, you're just that way, like that's who you are and that's how you operate. But there are people who are looking up to you. And so it's important that maybe we remember that, but also the importance of mentorship. You having your dad and those other individuals in your life gave you the opportunity to absorb all of that good stuff, professionally and personally, and saying, this is how I want to be, because they're mentoring me in a way that is positive. And so I think that it can go either way. And it's an important reminder for anyone who's listening. You can surround yourself with really, really good people that are going to help you to be the best versions of yourselves and who are going to mentor you professionally and personally to be elite. And then the reverse is also true. You can surround yourself with people who are going to drag you down and who aren't going to be that way. And so it's so, so important to look for those people who are going to help you to be that best version of yourself.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I just had a conversation with one of our brand new officers the other day, and I mentioned that very thing. I said, you're going to be around, and I said, you're going to see some officers and how they work and how they function, and you're really going to admire that, and you're going to want to be like that. And then you're going to have others where you say, maybe that's wouldn't be my approach. But I think surrounding yourself with top-notch professionals, people that know how to treat others, and like with my father, he always told me, you treat people like they're your family. If you treat people like they're your own family, then you'll never have a problem. And that young rookie officer I was talking to, they had it was an accident, and he responded, and I said, remember, that's probably the most traumatic incident that individual is going to be involved in. And if that was your mother or your father or your brother or your sister, how would you want them treated? And if you treat them that way, you'll never have a problem. And you'll go a long way in this job, and you do a lot of great things. And I learned that from my dad.
Yeah. And it also sounds like what you learned from your dad too is how to disconnect a little bit from the job. And we talked about this offline a little bit. There are a few things that you told me that I thought were really interesting. You said your dad you said 88 years old. And
88, yes.
But he still walks every day, right? He's still prioritizing his wellness. He's showing up. He's like a part of the family. Like he has this community. He's exercising. But you also talked a little bit about the importance of home life and being able to disconnect from the job. And you said earlier, 100% when you're at home, 100% when you're on the job. What are the strategies that have worked for you? Because that is one of the biggest conversations that I've had on this podcast is the importance of not letting your career become everything and having your personal life, your home life, your family life be a priority to you so that the job doesn't completely consume you. Is there anything that has helped you to be like, okay, this is kind of that hard switch from, work to home, home to work?
Yeah, I think that work-life balance is so important. And, unfortunately, when officers don't have that we just have, unfortunately, in our profession, we have a very high divorce rate. And, and a lot of that, we're asked to work a lot of different hours. We're asked to work a lot of overtime. There's a lot of commitment, and commitment to your job is fantastic. And, we look for that. We look to hire people that want to be committed to the agency and all that. But when you leave work, I think it's very important. And I saw this with my dad. I made a point with my children. If my son wanted to go out and hit baseballs, I would never say no to that request. And, I still try to do that today. And because I learned that from my dad. And if I was going to go out in the backyard and shoot baskets, if I asked him to go out there, he would do it. It didn't matter how many hours he worked, and he would work 8 hours at the Detroit Police Department. And then he would go work security for, another 6 hours. And he would come home and, I'm a young kid and I want to be outside playing ball and doing different things. And he always had the time for that. And I always remember that. And, I try to do that with my children. And I'm not perfect. I mean, like I say, it's, there's times when there's a lot of things weighing on you. But, I think it's important to, and I have this even with my wife, is there's times I come home and she knows something's wrong with me. And I just have to let her know, you know what, I can't talk about it right now. Everything's fine and I'm good. But, and we'll talk, but it's just not right now, and I saw that with my dad and I think what's important, what I've learned as being the police chief, and I learned it from my dad as well, is the impact that the executives have on. So my dad retired as a sergeant, and he was in the crime prevention section this last handful of years. So he had a lot of supervisors that were, these higher ranks, and I saw how they treated him, and I could hear the discussions with him and my mom about the way he was treated. Sometimes very, very well, other times not very well. Yeah. And, I took all that in as well, because I think sometimes as executives, you never want to forget where you came from. And, one of my beliefs is you never ask the troops to do anything you're not willing to do, So I try to get out and ride with them. I try to learn their kids' names, their wife or husband's names, things like that. Because I saw with my dad that didn't always happen, and leadership and creating that culture just can be so important. And if you're not doing it, then I think you're not doing something right, in my opinion. So,
yeah. When you were talking about your family, I was like kind of getting a little bit emotional, because I think that we all want to feel like we're successful, whether that's in our professional or our personal lives. I don't think that there's anyone who's like, yeah, I just really want to fail at work and in life. I think everyone wants to be successful, but sometimes I think hindsight is 2020. There's definitely been times in my life where I have not prioritized the things that are most important. And I think that sometimes you don't realize what is most important until maybe you're on the other side of things, and for me, I was always about, obviously in a different career than you, but always about career advancement. It was like I had to prove everybody wrong. Like I had this chip on my shoulder and I was like, you know what? Everything that I've been through in my life, everyone who doubted me, like I'm going to get to the top of this mountain and I'm going to, prove everybody wrong. And that was to my own detriment. Like I wasn't prioritizing myself. I wasn't prioritizing my family. And I do regret that. And, I think to have these conversations, especially if there's someone who's younger in their career listening, it's like, career advancement's great and it's great to love what you do and it's great to put your all, like you said, when you're there, but not to the detriment of your family, and there's so many times that I can't get back and people that I wish were still here that I could still talk to that I didn't prioritize. And so it made me a little emotional. And I'm so happy that you had such a good example early in your career with your dad to be able to then, prioritize your family and know what's important. And, like you said, you only have a handful of games you didn't miss. And there's not a lot of people who can say that, and so I really appreciate you sharing that. And to your point too about leading by example through leadership, I was just having a conversation. I won't say who it was with, but it was with an agency. This particular individual is a part of the wellness program at this agency, and they have one of the highest suicide rates in the country. This particular agency, and I asked her why. I was like, "What? Like, why do you think?" And one of the first things they said was leadership. There isn't a supportive leadership who's treating people well and who's prioritizing wellness. Do you think that plays a really big role? Do you think that when it comes to wellness, that it's important that leadership is bought in and is supportive and is, like you said, leading by example and also participating in these things? What is your opinion on that?
I think it's crucial in our line of work, in any line of work, right? People are going to make mistakes, right? And it happens. And, mistakes are recoverable, right? And mistakes in my line of profession, we identify the issue. I had an officer that backed into one of our carports just this past week, and we're addressing that issue. So, we say have some damage to a vehicle, but it's not the end of the world, and it's not, it was a mistake, and it's something that with some training and some, that we can work through, and I think that's the important thing. But I think for executives, I think it's crucial that we want to certainly set the bar high. We want to set the bar high with our expectations, but we also have to be realistic, and we have to, we tell our public all the time that we're human beings just like everybody else. But I think we also have to realize that our employees are human beings, and they're going to make mistakes, and things aren't going to go right, and they are going to have bad days, and that's part of being a human. And but we have to be supportive. I think. One of my philosophies is I try to get around my police building every single day and talk to every person in the building. That's one of my goals every single day. Is anybody that's in this building, I want to at least say hi to them, talk to them briefly. And, because I care, and I want them to know that I care. And I think a lot of executives, and this is just my opinion that I've seen, a lot do care a lot, but, we're a tough egg to crack sometimes, if that makes sense. And, we got a hard shell, and I think there's times when we have to soften up a little bit, and we have to really do a better job of relating with our employees on maybe some of the stresses they're going through. Now we're dealing with a whole new generation of police officers now that are completely different than my generation come through. So we're trying to adapt to that, and the work-life balance is crucial for them. They really enjoy their time off. When I first got on the job, we were fighting for overtime. Everybody wanted to work because they wanted to, have a nicer car, a nicer house, or this or that. This new generation, they really cherish their time off. So we have to embrace that. We have to work with that. And, but we also have to make coming into our building, coming into the police building, going out to protect our public, to be an enjoyable experience that they enjoy coming here. If they don't enjoy coming here, if they dread coming in every single day, we have big problems. And I think that comes to culture. I'm a big proponent of having a positive environment, and I think that's just very crucial.
Yeah. Can I ask you, because I know that wellness is something that's important to you. And I think that everything that you just said was wellness, creating a culture, creating an environment that people enjoy being, having conversations with people, getting to know their names, their kids' names, understanding what's going on in their lives, like making people feel valued is wellness. And I've said this before on the podcast, there's a lot of things out there in wellness and, public safety wellness that cost a lot of money. But effort does not cost money. It's time and it's awareness, And so I think even just starting there, because there's a lot of leadership that they're like, I don't even know where to start. It's like, well, that's a really good place to start. And I think you made it sound really easy. I'm sure it's not. I'm sure you have a lot of things going on, but to say, hey, like my goal just every day is to make sure everyone knows I'm here, that I care, say hi to everyone, look people in the eye, have a conversation. That to me sounds manageable, even with a large workload. And so maybe anyone who's listening who is in leadership, who's looking for like a stepping stone or a first start, that sounds to me like it's a really good jumping off point.
Yeah, I think carving that piece out of your day where you can, because the thing is, they don't get to, I'll give you an example. When I first took this job, I had every employee come in and I talked to them and I wanted to know what we were doing right, what we could improve on. And I said, do you have any questions? One of the officers said to me, well, Chief, what do you do all day? And it was a legitimate question. And I said, that's a great question. Let me go through my day yesterday. So, and I went through the different meetings and the different policies I was working on and the different things. And I said, I'll be honest with you, I'd rather much be out in a squad car with you than sitting behind this desk and doing policies. But we had a great conversation, and he just truly had no idea what I did all day. So that really stuck with me. And, it just that management by wandering around, getting out there, seeing what's going on. When we have community events here, I'm at every one of them because, why should I ask them to be out in the community if I'm not going to be out there with them? And I learn from them. I hope that they learn from me as well. And I think it helps them embrace the mission that we have, especially for me with community outreach. And, we had a subject yesterday, it was a mental health call, and the subject had firearms in the house, and, we were handling the situation very tactically. I was the third car there. I just happened to be out going to lunch. I heard the radio call. I went there, and I think the officers appreciate seeing that. Now, bigger agencies, Detroit Police Department, it's not possible. But I'm in a smaller agency where I have the ability to do that, and I can carve that time out, and I try to make sure that happens. And where did I learn that from? Because I saw that with previous administrators that I was around that I respected, and I said, that's something I'm going to take with me. So
yeah, that is really funny. And it makes total sense. I've never had anyone say this on the podcast where someone's like, "What do you do all day?" That's so funny. But I can see, because I've had other conversations where, people are like, we don't even see the chief. We don't know where they are. We don't know what they do. And there's this resentment that kind of builds, being like, well, we're doing all this work and we feel like they're just off doing we don't know what. So that conversation and that transparency of like, hey, like this is what my day looks like. This is what I do. And I would trade places with you if I could, or I could hop in the patrol vehicle with you if I could. I think that that's really interesting. And I could see it. I could see how maybe some people would have resentment or maybe judgment if they don't understand the job duties or the roles. My question for you, because I know that wellness is really important to you. Why? Why is wellness something that you're so passionate about?
I think, so I'm a sports guy, and I love sports. I love, so I think physical wellness is crucial, especially in this line of work, for our officers themselves, for their safety, for their partner's safety, and most importantly, for their families. If our officers aren't coming to work fit and physically healthy, that's a problem for everyone. And, we want our officers. So I want to encourage that. I want to encourage folks. I'm a runner. I've run very proud. I've run 2 marathons, completed them, survived them. And I was never a big runner. My wife was a runner, and so she taught me. But lifting weights and staying strong and things like that's something. I lift less weights than I did when I was younger, but I still do that. Exercise is a priority for me, and I try to walk my dog every day too. So I try to do those things, encourage those. At the department here, we have, and I was raised like that, I should say. So I go back to my time at Farmington Hills. We had a police softball team. We played basketball. We played flag football. So I was raised in a culture of togetherness, team, and getting out and staying healthy. So that was important. And it's harder as you get older. I mentioned to you previously, I ran 3 miles this morning with a buddy of mine, and it's my way to start the day. And it's a great way for me to clear my head. And I thought a lot about our discussions today and things like that. And I like to golf too. And I like to get out and golf. And a golf is a you versus you, Mm-hmm. And, so you have time to think and those things. But I think that wellness, both physically and then the other side is your mental health. And we in law enforcement, I've seen multiple studies that an average person sees 4 traumatic incidents in their life. It could be a death of a loved one. It could be a tragic car accident, things like that. Law enforcement is anywhere from 500 to 800 in a career that they have to see traumatic incidents. And what are we doing about those? How are we managing those initially? But then what are we doing after the fact, and how are we handling it? Now, I came on the job, and there was a lot of my supervisors were Vietnam veterans, right? And they were the toughest of tough. I mean, they were folks that have seen and heard things that none of us have. And they would say, "All right, kid, you all right? You good?" And that was it. That was the wellness check, and I think as a profession, and I'm not trying to be critical of them because they cared, they asked, but we have to provide more resources because, the men and women that are out there every single day have to see and hear things that nobody in the world has to see and hear. And and a lot of times it's our world at its worst situation. And, whether it be children being victims or domestic violence or homicides and, all those things. And they have to see and handle those things. And we as a profession, as executives, we have to make sure that they have the resources, after those incidents. And, as I mentioned to you before, we began a peer support team here, and that was just in the last year. So, I mean, we're a little bit behind the times on that, but this is something that has developed, and I'm very proud of that, and it's been very successful. And because, the thing is, when officers go through a traumatic incident, they don't necessarily want to hear from the chief. I mean, as much as I care about them and I want to know they're okay, their peers are the ones that know them best. They know them every single day when they go in the locker room and change their clothes and get ready for roll call and sit in roll call. And they spend time away from work. They know each other. And if they're having issues or struggles, I really believe strongly that the peer support program is just is the way that we can provide those resources to them.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing a little bit of insight into kind of your previous experience with these things too, because I think that that's really important. And I'm kind of curious, there's a few things I want to touch on, but you kind of being raised in a generation or a culture where there was that togetherness, right? There was that community. You guys, like you said, played basketball and flag football and all the things. And now this, from my understanding, you can correct me if I'm wrong, this younger, newer generation coming in maybe doesn't have that same type of connectedness. I know a lot of people I talk to, like, it's kind of like, okay, clocking out. I'm out of here and I'm going. And my question is, how do you support that organizationally to still get people together, to connect with each other, and to prioritize wellness?
I think it starts with that team philosophy. And as I mentioned to you, I'm a Michigan graduate, so I'm a Bo Schembechler fan, and he always said the team. And getting folks, and what I try to is solicit suggestions from the team.
Yeah.
what would the team, so for example, just in the last week, I had one of the officers come in and said, "Hey, Chief, what would you think about having a Friday night pickleball event where we could all bring our spouses and do that, like a team building kind of thing after work?" And I said, "Wow, that sounds like a great idea." So that's something that we're pulling together.
Yeah.
We have a running team that runs at a park near the station here, and we were able to get a handful of officers from our agency and another agency in the area, and we were doing that as well. And again, I encourage that, but I also want to be a part of that because spending the time, letting them know that I do care about their health, and I just think it's very important. When I first took this job, I had a good friend of mine that was a retired police executive, and he came in to congratulate me, and he said, "Chief, I want to tell you one thing. Just remember this." He said, "They don't care how much you know. They want to know that you care."
Yeah.
And I'll never forget that. And I remember that. And I try to take that with me every day because it's just so important. And so I want to encourage that team philosophy. It's different. I can tell you that now a lot of these new officers, they're gamers. So they finish a shift and they go home and they all get on their headsets and they do games. But you know what? Hey, fantastic, but they're together, they're talking, or they're maybe not together, but they're together on their gaming devices, and that's this new generation. And again, that's another way that they can get together. And I think that togetherness, and it just helps us when we come to work every single day to provide the service to our community that because the officers enjoy being around each other, they enjoy coming to work, and so I think it's being that team is very beneficial.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I've actually never heard that they're going home and they're playing video games, but together. I think that that's really cool because it's adapting to times, and like different people are going to want different things to be able to decompress. Right. And so if that's one of the things, but you can still encourage that connection, I think that that's really interesting. I agree with you on the fact that people don't care how much you know, but they want to know you care. One of the things my mentor taught me really early, and it actually took me a little time to understand it. I don't know if you've ever been in that situation where someone gives you advice and you're like, yeah, sounds good. But then maybe a couple years later, you're like, I get it now. I understand what they were trying to tell me. But in the beginning, I remember my mentor was like, you're never going to know everything. You're never going to be someone who has all the answers. And don't try to be. If someone comes up to you and asks you a question, it's okay to say, I don't know, but then let them know I'll find out. I don't know, but let me find out for you. And it was this kind of sense of vulnerability, bringing the walls down and having those authentic conversations instead of trying to be someone that maybe you're not yet. And then of course, every time you get a question where maybe you don't know the answer to that, every time you find out, now you do know. So you know more each time. But I was like, yeah, sounds good. And I think it took me a while to understand the message of people are buying into who you are. They want to know that you are a human being. And I think that so often when we step into these positions of leadership, and I think that everyone within the organization is a leader, regardless of what your title, your rank is. And of course, you have, official titles, and that matters too. But I think everyone can be a leader within the organization. But I think that you almost put this pressure on yourself to be that all knowing, and you're I'm going to put up almost this wall of I am here, I have arrived, and the moment that I started just having genuine conversations with people, instead of trying to be the top person, that's when I felt like everything kind of fell into place, and everything, from a wellness perspective, kind of started to advance. And I think that when people know that you're a human and that you care, instead of you just trying to be the leader, I don't know if I'm making any sense or if I'm just rambling. But for me, I had to bring down those walls and say, you know what? Yes, I'm in this particular position. Yes, I do know a lot. No, I don't know everything. Yes, I care about you and your questions. And if I don't know the answer, I'm going to get there. But I think when you can have that human connectedness, people are going to buy into you more. And when the individuals thrive, the team thrives. And when the team thrives, individuals thrive. So that's the last thing I'll say about like the team mentality. But I like that you step into this position of like, hey, I want to be around. And yes, I'm the chief, but like, I'm also a person. And yes, like I care about you and I know a lot, but like, I don't know everything. And I'm going to be here to support you no matter what.
Yeah, I've made a point in my time here, and this is something I learned over the years. My family comes into this building. My mother, my father, they live in the community. My wife, most of my team knows, my wife, Jackie. My kids, we were at an event Saturday, and my son was there, and in having the conversations, just being completely transparent, because I think in law enforcement, sometimes we're the worst. We're like, oh, we're the police and we got this big hard shell and we're big tough guys. And yeah, you know what? We have to be warriors. We have to be survivors. I mean, we are trained to be survivors. But that doesn't mean that I can't stop my squad car and chat with a couple of kids that are walking down the street. You know what I mean? That's what we need to do. We need to let them know. And I always tell people, I have children too, and we have a lot of incidents with schools these days, and I had a meeting last night, and I told the group, I said, when we're protecting your children, we treat them like they're our own children, and that's important, and people appreciate that. The citizens appreciate it, and then the officers appreciate it, because a lot of them have young families. My kids are in their 20s now, but a lot of them have very young families. And when they go to these scenes, a lot of times, they're thinking about their kids. What if that was my child that was a victim? What if that was, my wife that got in a serious car accident? And that's the way we have to look at it, and we have to treat them that way as well, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think that having that like sense of vulnerability is really hard. I think it's really necessary, but it's really hard, right? It's hard to like show up as yourself, especially like you said, when you're in an environment that requires you to be strong and tough and, to be on high alert all the time, because you can't really bring it down all the way, right? Like you have to still, be prepared for whatever comes in that day. But I think that is difficult because a lot of times I think historically, being vulnerable was viewed as weakness rather than strength. And I know that you touched on, kind of how you grew up and this mentality of like, you good kid, like suck it up, rub dirt on it, like let's keep going. And one of the things that you had said to me when we talked offline that really stuck with me, and I want to thank you for saying this because it resonated with me. But I also think it was such a powerful statement that'll resonate with other people. And you said that over time, you develop a lot of scars and it's hard to get through those things. What are maybe some of the things that you went through that maybe developed some of those scars, and how did you get through that? How did you go from, we talked about this offline too, of like, kind of that PTSD to PTSD, how do you get to that growth stage when we know that, in your specific career path, you're going to see a lot of really hard things. You're going to go through a lot of stressful situations. You're going to go through scary things, and it will develop scars and change you over time. But how do you get through that? What was your experience with that?
Yeah, my experience was with that, and it is because we do have scars over the years. We have incidents that that we just will never forget, and then there's times when the memories are triggered, and it's part of this job. And what I relay, what is important to me personally, and this is me, is my faith. And I go to church every Sunday, and I try to practice my faith. And that's, one of the things, when young officers come on too, and I'm not trying to push one faith or the other, but I think that's important. God's important, the most important. And being able to look inside, but also, I think it's important to know the people around you and know if they're struggling, if they need additional resources, things like that. And, I've been married for 27 years, and my wife is my rock. And, we sit down and, again, as I mentioned, it may not be that night, but maybe a couple nights later, I'll let her know, we had a young child that died, and, it was tough. And, I mentioned you earlier, when I was a young officer, 22 years old, And just learning the job, I responded. I'll never forget it because I was driving on Farmington Road, and we got a call of a youngster that had fell into a swimming pool and was not breathing. And as I was driving down the street, I looked down the side street. They gave the run out, and I looked, and the family was waving to me. They were right there. I was literally right there. And we gave immediately CPR. The medics got there quickly, and we did everything we could. And that little boy did not survive. And the same week, we had a child around the same age that was electrocuted and did not survive. And it was just two very traumatic incidents in a very short period of time for a 22-year-old. My nephew's got 2 years on the job. I was probably roughly the same age as him. And it's tough for a 22-year to grasp all that. But I felt like I was fine. And then it wasn't until I started 10 years later that I started having my own children. My children got to be that age that, my wife said, "Hey, what, you must have had a nightmare last night. You were wrestling around." And those things were coming back to me. And, it wasn't until I had my own children that I realized how it had impacted and that there were scars there from that. And, for 10 years, it was very, very upsetting. But I don't know if I was too young but it wasn't until I saw my own kids and that it just really impacted me. So I think law enforcement officers, firefighters, paramedics, when you see those kind of things, they do stay with you. But I think deep down in your heart, you have your faith, you have the belief that you've done everything you can to help those folks. And we do that. And, I had some advice from a mentor of mine, Eddie Washington, who was executive director of the University of Michigan Department of Public Safety and Security. And he said to me one day, he said, I was a deputy chief at the time. He said, "Deputy chief," he said, "remember, we go on a roll call," because in law enforcement, a lot of times we're like, "All right, let's make sure everybody gets home safe." That's our thing. We want to, make sure everybody gets home safe. And he said to me, at our campus, we have to make sure not only the police officers get home safe, but we want to make sure everybody gets home safe. All of our citizens, all of our students, staff, and faculty. And that really impacted me because that is our goal every single day, but that doesn't always happen. And it's tough. It's tough to see death. It's tough to see children that are victims, and those things do stick with you. But, I think we have resources now. Our employee assistance plans, our peer support team are trained to identify the signs of officers that are struggling. And, and hopefully, and I believe we have made a lot of gains in that area. To support our officers, because I didn't think for a lot of years we didn't, and it is what it is. But I think we're advancing, and these peer support teams, mental health professionals, to help our officers, because it is very traumatic, and those scars do stick with you.
Yeah. And I think, to your point, a lot of the things that you're putting into place now are proactive and reactive. And I think we have to have both. It's really important to understand, how do we get in front of some of these things proactively? But then if and when there is an event, you also have those reactive resources. And to your point, and I have this conversation a lot, someone might not need something today. They might not need something tomorrow. It might be like in your situation, 10 years later, that now you're like, what is going on? Now I can't sleep. Now I'm having nightmares. Now this is really impacting me. And so for the agency to have those resources proactively, now there's no question of where to go or what to do, right? Now you've had it. Now you've had it for, I think you said the last year, you guys have really gotten this off the ground. So now if someone 5 years from now says, "Oh my gosh, something is impacting me now," there's no question on where to go or what to do. You got them, and there's that message that these resources are available. And so, I think that sometimes, unfortunately, as human beings, I think that we're really reactive. And it's not until there's a problem that we're like, oh, now we have to deal with it. So having it now established, now that generations to come, whenever they need something, they have it.
Yeah, I was, so I live in the township here. I had a very short drive. So after my run this morning, during my run, it's my mental health time where I think about what's going on. I thought about this, speaking with you today. And I'm a big fan of Jelly Roll, right? So the artist Jelly Roll, right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah. That
you
took
know,
me off guard for a second,
I
but
know,
I'm with you. I'm
and
with you.
he has
Okay.
a song, and it's very where he says, "I'm not okay, but it's all going to be all right,"
Yeah.
and I thought of that when I was running this morning, and then on the way to work, I played that song and listened to the lyrics, and I just think that's very true to. Because he's talking about, he had a lot of struggles in his life and he's moved through those and he's working through some weight loss, I follow all that because I just think, and he focuses on God and how important that is to him. So there's a lot of pieces that I like that, but I'm not okay, but it's all going to be all right. And that's what I think, we have to realize in this profession that it is not, it's tough to see those things. And they're things that folks just don't, normal citizens don't have to see those things. And our officers have to see a lot of them. And,
Yeah.
but it's going to be all right. And we're going to move on. And if we need the resources, we're going to be there to provide them for them.
Yeah, I love that. That made my day. Because I think it says a couple things. One, it says it's okay to not be okay. It's okay to sit here and say, you know what, I'm not doing okay right now. But then to follow up with, but I will be okay. It's all going to work out. It's all going to be okay. It gives you that mentality of like resilience, of never giving up, keep going. And what do we need to do to make sure that we support you in all aspects of wellness, in all aspects of your life? Because sometimes you're not okay and it's has nothing to do with the job. Sometimes you're not okay because there's stuff going on at home. Sometimes you're not okay because whatever. And so to say, you know what, one, it's okay to say that you're not okay, but also like, we got you and we're going to make sure that it's going to be okay. I love that. And I actually am fascinated by his story and his perseverance because my dad was in prison for a long time. And, he was also in prison and, went through a lot of his own things, but that mental like strength to have that perseverance to say, you know what, like, I'm going to achieve this one day. No matter what I've been through in my life, no matter how dark things seem, no matter how hopeless things seem, I'm going to keep pushing and I'm going to be successful and I'm going to achieve the things that I want to achieve. And so, I'm a big fan of him and his story. I thank you for bringing that up. I think that's really relevant. I know that we're kind of running a little bit short on time. I want to be respectful. And the last thing I'll ask you, and I know you've had a lot of really instrumental mentors in your life and in your career. What words of wisdom would you share with someone who's earlier in their career? Maybe something that you wish you would have known earlier or something that has helped you along the way.
Yeah, just within the last week, I had one of our officers in my office, and we were talking about how the job was going. And this officer had just come off the field training officer program. And I said to him, Paul, remember this. You have every police officer in this building. Even though you're not in the field training officer program, everybody here can help you. And later on that day, he was writing a report, and I was walking by, and I said, hey, Paul, you doing all right? You look like you're, he goes, yeah, Chief, And I was able to, and I just said to him again, we're all here to support you. We want you to be successful. So if you need help, ask for it. My nephew Patrick, when he started the job, we sat down and we had a lot of conversations, and we talked about some of the things living within your means. Now your first job and you have money coming in. What are you saving for? A house, your car, things like that financially. We talked about physical. He's very physically fit. He did it. And we talked most importantly about the mental stress of the job, and he's already in 2 years seen a lot of things. And he's reached out to me a few times and we've talked through what he saw, his reaction. He showed me different times some of the body camera footage of things on how he handled it. And we kind of talked through that. So I think for our young officers to know that there are people out there that they're, that can really be there for them. And again, I got some great advice from my dad. The first question he asked me when I got hired, he said, do they have a 401k? Can you invest money on the side? These are things that I'll never forget that because I I got into that program right away, and I'm very thankful today. And if I wanted to retire tomorrow, I could. And but I love my job, and I'm going to keep doing this job. But yeah, the advice is just because you see traumatic incidents, just because you're having certain feelings, does not mean that you're weak. That means that you're a human being. And if you need assistance, if you need a peer support, reach out for help, because unfortunately, the military, 22 military officers every single day take their lives. In law enforcement, we lose more officers in law enforcement to suicide than we do from suspects taking officers' lives. So we have to do better. We have to keep doing this. And as you mentioned, financing programs isn't always, possible. It's just not. And, cities, municipalities are always trying to cut back on what they spend. But there are a lot of programs that we can do, and it starts right with us. It starts with our executives. It starts with our shift officers reaching out and helping each other, because we need it. We just do.
Thank you. Thank you for your time. I appreciate you coming on here. And honestly, it's been an honor to have you and to share your words of wisdom. If there's anything I missed, I'll let you take the floor, but thank you.
Yeah. Well, Paige, I'd just like to tell you that, again, this is not something I do. My wife is a big podcaster. This is going to be my first time. But our conversation and the direction that you're heading in your work, I thought was just very vital. And I think you mentioned it very early on. If we can help one officer out there or one person, then we're doing a good thing, And so that's the reason I agreed to it. And it's been a pleasure talking to you. I've learned something too. As I mentioned in my run this morning, it made me think of a lot of things that we're doing right, and then I also think of a lot of things that we could be better at. So we're going to continue to try to get better here, and not only at the Plymouth Township Police Department, but as a profession. I think we're moving in the right direction, and we're making sure that our officers have the resources they need, and they deserve it, because they're putting their lives on the line every single day.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And, I said this before too, but it means a lot, and it really does. And I know that you're busy, and I know that you don't usually say yes to these types of things. So I really appreciate your time. So thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Paige.